Hi everyone, this is a how to plan video. It's looking at how I would suggest you plan, giving you some tips and tricks about the best way to plan. So I'm sure that you've all heard your English teachers telling you how important it is to plan your essays. It is really important. It's really helpful, particularly in the exam situation where there is quite a bit of pressure and some people may feel that it may be quite stressful. But there are also plenty of other reasons as well, and I have put a lot of different reasons why it's important to plan on the PowerPoint, so have a look at those. The way that you plan is generally down to preference. Some things do need to be the same, but in terms of what goes down on paper, how it goes down on paper, that is very much up to you. Some people like to use bullet points, some people like to use tables, some people prefer to use spider diagrams. So long as you're getting the right things down, it doesn't matter how they go onto paper. So let's get started. The first thing I would say to do is to read the question and anything that comes with it. So in this case, you've got the question and the poem. Read those first. Don't start writing, just read first. This helps you to really think through what the question is asking you to do. And it helps you to start thinking about which poem you might compare it with and anything else that you think is important. So I would have your highlighter at the ready, read through, highlight keywords in the question, and then in the poem you can highlight anything that links to what the question is asking you to do. So here the question is, compare how poets present romantic feelings in Winter Swans and in one other poem from Love and Relationships. So the key words here are romantic feelings. And I'm not going to go through the poem right now. That's something that you can do when you're doing your planning, but I would pick out anything that is about romantic feelings and start thinking about what to compare it with. For this particular poem and for this particular question, I've chosen to compare Winter Swans with Neutral Tones by Thomas Hardy. The two poems work really well together. They have a lot of similarities. So I think it would be a perfect one to compare with. So now I've familiarised myself with the question, with the poem, I now need to start planning. Now I've already started the plan because I thought it would be useful to talk you through what I've done here. So as you can see, hopefully, these two bold statements are my main points. Now I've only got two. Because remember, when you're writing this essay, you're writing about two poems. So essentially 1 point is 2 in 1. It's writing about two poems in 1 point. So you're going to have a lot to write about. When you're starting to think about planning, start with the points. Don't do 1 point and then flesh it out, then another point. Start with your points and go from there. So for me, I came up with 2 points here. Both poems show a couple growing apart and both poems link to nature to explore the relationship. So those are my 2 points. Then I go back and I flesh it out. Now the things that need to go into your plan, I would say, are an explanation of your point, key quotes, and links to context. If you want, you can quickly analyse the quotes, particularly if you're worried you might forget something. Perhaps you know it's a metaphor, but you're worried you're not going to write about it. Put metaphor. If you're really worried you're going to forget it, put it in capitals and highlight it so you know that you've got to write about that particular thing. Essentially, your plan is jotting down what you definitely want to go in, jotting down anything that will help you with your writing. So it is very personal. Every person will plan differently, but I would say it is important to have your key quotes, links to context, and a bit of explanation as well. It doesn't have to be very neatly written out. It doesn't have to be paragraphs, bullet points, keywords, abbreviations. That's what makes a plan and not the actual essay. Now remember, when I said writing down the quotes that I would write down would be from Neutral Tones, because that poem is not in front of me. So I'm a bit more worried that I might forget those quotes. Winter Swans, that's the one that's on the exam paper. So there's no point me copying out quotes from Winter Swans to write down in my plan, because that's a waste of time. If I'm trying to make a note of which quotes I want to use, what I could do is number them, and then if I want to use quote number 3 or whatever, I'll just put down number 3, so I know which one I need to use. But I wouldn't suggest writing down quotes from the poem that you've got in front of you. That is a waste of time. And just a quick note about the poem that you compare it to. Obviously, I've chosen Neutral Tones. There are one or two others that would go well with Winter Swans, but it is important that they do link together in some way. So, for example, the last essay question we looked at, the poem was Mother Any Distance. If you were to compare Mother Any Distance with Love's Philosophy or Neutral Tones, for example, it wouldn't go, and you'd really struggle to come up with points that link the two poems together. So be very careful about which poems you compare with which. And remember that your main point needs to be about both poems. If it's not about both poems, you won't be able to write about both poems. The main point, which I've got here in bold, is what links the two together. It's what helps you to write about both poems underneath that sort of heading, if you like. So make sure it's about both. Don't write a point, a topic sentence, which is about one poem and not the other, because then you're not comparing, and that is the whole point of the essay. So if we look at what the point that I've already fleshed out, I've got an explanation of the point. This is not a breakup, but there is a lack of love. They're not as close as they used to be. And then I've pointed out that there is a bit of a difference here. In Winter Swans, they reconcile, but they don't in Neutral Tones. Then I've picked out key quotes here. I've got Neutral Tones, I've got grey, I've got the smile on your mouth was the deadest thing. And I've picked out an adjective there, but I could pick out more. I've got the adjective neutral, but also grey I could pick out as well. Deadest, like a shark. She's, there's just no emotion. And I've got a brief explanation. These quotes all show that there's no passion, there's no love, there's no anger either. They're not fighting for their relationship. It's just passive, there's no emotion, nothing there. And then I have written down here a quote from Winter Swans, just because I wanted to show you what I would compare it to. Silent and apart. So again, we've got this separation in both poems. And then I've got a link here to context. Shears is divorced, and the book of poetry that Winter Swans is in is all about love and breakups. Hardy had marriage difficulties, and I would then go into a bit more detail about those links to context. Remember, the links to context do need to link. If it doesn't link to what you're saying, I don't know, say for example, I knew that Shears was born in France. I don't actually think that's true, but say he was, that's completely irrelevant to my point, so I wouldn't need to put that in. So you must make sure that the context is linked to the point. So now I'm going to do the same thing to this second point, just to show you my thought process. So this second point is both poems linked to nature to explore the relationship. So what do I want to say? Well, Winter Swans, we've got the weather reflecting the relationship. In fact, both of them, the weather reflects the relationship. And that is really important. So first of all, I just need to write down so I don't forget this, that is pathetic fallacy. And we've got, obviously I'm not going to write this quote down because it's from Winter Swans, but 2 days of rain and then a break. So we've got this, the weather, that it's stopped raining. There's a break in the clouds, a break in the weather, which reflects the break in the fighting. They've stopped fighting, they're exhausted, and they're starting to sort of reconcile. And again, in neutral tones, we've got the sun was white. So there's no colour to anything. It's all neutral. Even the sun, that hot, fiery sun, is just white, no colour. Both of them are stood by a pond or a lake. I'm going to come back to that one because at the moment I'm not 100% sure of the importance of that one. So we've got the weather reflecting the relationship. And then I'm just explaining a break in the fighting. So that's winter swans versus no colour in neutral tones. And then, of course, that is pathetic fallacy, and I've got the quote there. It's not in any particular way, it's all, my thoughts are just being sort of thrown down there. So I appreciate that if someone else looked at this, they'd go, I don't think that makes sense. But remember, this plan is for you. It's not for your partner, it's not for the person sat next to you, it's not for the teacher. Although we might be able to see your ideas coming through your plan, don't think, oh, the teacher's going to read that and it's not going to make sense. So long as the essay makes sense, the plan is what works for you. It needs to obviously help you to make sure that your essay is well structured. But if you're writing it down and you're just, words are going down on the page because you're just getting everything out of your head, don't worry about it looking a bit funny. So what else do I want to say? Well, we've got both of them. Talk about birds. One of the big ways that this is done is the swans in Winter Swans. They reflect the relationship of the people, and they're sort of entwined together. First of all, we've got symbolism, because swans are sort of that's quite symbolic of love, but also we've got this metaphor. The swans are almost a metaphor for the couple, really, a metaphor for love as well, and sticking together. They mate for life. That would be a key quote there as well. And then obviously the couple sees them, and as they walk away, they are holding hands as well. And then also we've got in neutral tones, like an ominous bird, which is the way that Hardy describes her. So we've got the simile there, obviously. But that's not a nice way to describe someone, an ominous bird, and a grin of bitterness swept in like an ominous bird. So we've got these comparisons with birds, but in one way it's quite positive and peaceful, and in the other one it's not very nice. It's quite negative. So we've got, although they both talk about birds, when we compare it, we can see that there is a difference there. So I've put it in that order because obviously that's very important. Well, I think the weather first, because that's quite a big point to make, then the birds, because that's also very important. This one's coming last because I think I probably have enough to say with those 2 points. This will be my final point if I need it, but I may not, so I'm going to put a question mark there. And just finally, the context. I want to put about Hardy's wife. His first wife died, and so perhaps the negativity reflects the fact that it's too late. She's gone, so they can't reconcile, whereas there's more hope for Shears. But I'm going to put a question there just to remind myself that rather than saying it's definite, I'm going to say it suggests. So that's just quickly a plan of the main points. Now I haven't here got my introduction, And I haven't here got my conclusion, but this is a plan, a breakdown of my main points. So have a go. I hope it goes